Welcome back, everyone, once again to another Planet Coaster video on this channel. Today we're going to launch straight into picking up where we left off in the as yet untitled micro park. I mean, I'm recording this commentary immediately after I uploaded last week's episode, so maybe someone already suggested a really good name that I liked, but right now I think it's still called Micromania. We're going to continue the construction of the Main Street buildings, which admittedly is going to be very short because there's only one left on Main Street. And then we're going to continue construction of the rest of the buildings in this park as well. So let's get on. Let's get right on with it. So this is going to be the Pip Shop. I think it's Pip Shot, isn't it? Pip Shot Water Shop. That was a really difficult thing to say. Try saying that 7 times fast. Pip Shot Water Shop. I've already messed it up. I couldn't even say it once fast. Leave a comment below if you're... I didn't know it was a theme I mentioned last week. I said that quite a fair bit, didn't I? Leave a comment below about this, that, and the other. So there you go. See if you can see Pip Shot Water Shop. There we go. I can just speed it up like there. Pip Shot Water Shop. So I could do it. What was that? What was that commentary? Hello everyone. Those of you who are new to my channel, I hope you enjoyed your short stay before you now click off. There's not much to say about this shop though, really. I mean, it's just a generic wooden building. I didn't have a great big footprint to build on because obviously we're in between the entrance to the Ferris wheel and the roller coaster, but the shape we have to work with is fairly awkward. So it's a bit of a finicky, tricky thing to work with. So let's just keep the actual look of the building at least simple. Just a very bare wooden construction, but still looks kind of nice with those wooden plank accents, that sort of thing. And we'll top it off with just a generic grey roof built from the art shape pieces, which I think they get a lot of mileage in terms of you can make really like any kind of roof shape you want using the art shape pieces, so they're really good for that sort of thing. And there we are. I made a little triforce out of the triangle pieces to get the very edge of that building done, and then that's it. Although I did put a little curb out there just to again mask out some of the gaps in the pathway, or at least, between the pathway and the shop building. That was another theme that came up a lot last episode, was me trying to cover up the imperfections of the paths in this park. Planet Coaster, and I don't really know how, again, I mentioned this last episode as well, I don't know how you could make a path system that could just do what you wanted it to do, like have some sort of paintbrush tool for it. Maybe that is the solution, actually. But for now, paths, it's very hard to get them to do exactly what you want. So you always get these little rough edges and gaps here and there. So a lot of the challenge in Planet Coaster is building covers for those imperfections without it seeming like you obviously only built that to be to be a cover for an imperfection in the path. So I'm building this little wing here just to, again, cover up that hole in the paths. And it's the correct height for a human to stand up into. This could be like the storage room of the shop, or I don't know, the staff toilet. It could be. We can let our imaginations run wild and imagine it to be whatever we want it to be. That room holds the book of all the secrets of the life, the universe, and everything. It's all here. It was here. It's got the Holy Grail. It's a very important room. This is the most important room in the whole park. That room there. That's the building. Thank goodness it's over. We can move on. So we're going to work our way over to the other side of the park very gradually. Well, first of all, I think I just got bored of this point. Like, I can't bother to extend the building again to cover up that gap in the pathway. So I'm going to extend the curbing out a little bit. And then we're going to work our way over to the other side of the park eventually, as we can do the final building that needs doing. Again, just finishing off covering up the gaps in the pathway. I feel like I don't really know the order of things that happen in this footage. Like, we just need to construct the building around the toilet block at the north side of the park. And oh, never mind. I thought it was going to happen now. I was just trying to remember. I did this. I built the entire park in a day yesterday. So it's all still quite fresh in my mind. So I thought that I'd built the toilet block immediately after the Pip Shot. Goodness me. Pip Shot Water Shop. It's probably not, it might even be cool though. Is it Pip Shop or Pip Shot or Pip the Water Shop? The Water Shop. I'm pretty sure I built this fairly soon after, and it turns out I did. So there we are. Again, very small footprint to work with, and we are very, very, very close to the Eurofighter coaster. So I paused the game just as the test car was running past to make sure that this building is not going to get too close. And to be honest, I think if this were a real park, this would be too close to the car. But, we'll just put a sign up. We'll just put a sign up saying, don't do it, guys. This park is built by Lowne Aerospace, and we are a very rich company. We actually own our own island and have declared it an independent country. And we have no laws regarding the safety of theme parks. So it's fine. It's realistic in that that's the canon. So there we are. It doesn't matter. But maybe if we were to consider pitching this park to another country, we'll just 3D print another copy and send it somewhere else. That might be something worth considering. I don't know what any of that was. I'm so sorry. So now we've done all of the buildings of this park. The last thing that needs constructing is the actual station building, and indeed the shed for the Eurofighter coaster. I did mention this last week, but a lot of Eurofighter coasters in real life don't have maintenance sheds or, I don't know, other bits of track that you can take cars off the main loop from. What a horrible sentence that was, but I hope you get the gist of what I meant. But some Eurofighters do, and we have the space. We have a massive gap, in fact, in the middle of the layout of this coaster, so I thought we may as well do it. We may as well put a little shed there. And when this roller coaster is up and running, it will have 2 cars on the track, so if one fails or it's a quiet day, we don't need... There's just a low number of guests for whatever reason. We can just put one in storage just to reduce the strain on the cars, keep them well maintained. Who knows? I'm sure there are a great number of examples of why you would want to take one car off the track. It's just nice to have the facility to take them off the loop. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, which I guess for the purposes of this game, I will never need it because transfer tracks are purely aesthetic in Planet Coaster, but they are just a nice thing to add to the realistic, at least the appearance of realism in a theme park. So then we're just going to construct, there's a bit of a puzzle here in terms of getting the entrance queue up to the station platform without hitting the track or anything like that. So in the end, I went underneath the station. I'm keeping this fairly simple. I can't think of many Eurofighter coasters that have heavy theming. Most of them are just very simple constructions. They're in sort of lower budget parks or parks with smaller spaces to work with, like your pier parks, things like that, or the Nickelodeon internal parks. It's a weird way of saying indoor theme parks, but generally it's just a very bare bones minimalist station. Everything's just not very, very heavily themed. I guess the Nickelodeon parks aren't a fantastic example because there is a fair bit of theming to those parks, and another example of a heavily themed Eurofighter coaster, I believe, would be is it Saw the Ride? I believe Saw the Ride at Thorpe Park is a Eurofighter coaster, and that's obviously incredibly heavily themed. So there are exceptions to this rule, but generally a lot of Eurofighters are just very bare bones, not a lot of theming to them. So that's why I wasn't too worried about having a highly detailed station, and that's why I felt comfortable just having guests pass underneath the station, because it is, for all intents and purposes, just a giant steel cage with lots of space to walk underneath. Now I'm placing barriers here just so that guests won't walk through the pillars. The pathfinding AI will notice that there are barriers there and they will navigate their way around them. That was the theory. The reality after I opened the park is that guests will still walk through those barriers, but luckily they're underneath the station. Hopefully people won't be looking too hard at that pathway and will notice that. I mean, I've now drawn attention to it, so I've undone all that hard work, but I'm willing to forgo that layer of realism there just because I couldn't really be bothered to come up with a better solution for the pathway, to be quite honest. I was a bit bored. I was like, this is fine. Again, Eurofighters, they can have the appearance at least of look a bit slapdash, not too much theming. They just plop down and they're good to go make some money. So as you can see, I forgot to put the exit queue on the kickflip ride, so I quickly added that. And then I think I've opened the park, but I've quickly paused it after seeing that actually there's some stuff that needs finishing before I would feel comfortable opening it. I wanted to make sure that all of the buildings were built before I opened it. Now I'm going to change I've just done it, but I've changed the ground path texture. Or should I say, I've changed the ground asphalt texture to match the color of the paths. And as you can see, all of the paths now blend seamlessly with the ground. This park immediately looks a lot better, so I'm now comfortable opening it. Although that being said, I immediately realized that we've actually got no staff, apart from some vendors in the park. So let's just I've probably hired a bit too much here. I think I ended up letting go all of the mechanics except one, and I got rid of a couple of janitors, because this is a lot of staff for a park that is, you can see the entire park in this shot here, actually. So we probably didn't need this many members of staff. But here they all are, at least for now. We've got a little King Coaster entertainer as well. I thought, oh, by golly, before the guests come into the park, let's quickly order in some park benches and place them. So there's actually places for them to sit. Probably need some bins and stuff. I didn't think it through. I probably should have done all this before I hit the open button. But I was getting lots of pop-ups saying my vendors were unhappy and were threatening to quit, I guess, because they're all standing in their shops with no guests to serve. So I thought, let's just quickly open the park now that, there are rides here. We can't open the roller coaster just yet because there's no station. I know it doesn't matter in this game. Guests will still ride in it without a station building. But, I just wanted to have it look somewhat believable that we would need to build some sort of shelter to protect the inner workings of the station. I don't know. Before we ended up going with letting guests ride it. But look at that, we now have ample places for guests to sit after all of the walking they will need to do to navigate this vast expanse of a theme park. We've got lots of resting points for them. I guess the queues will be quite big because there's not many rides, so maybe they will want to sit down at some point. And I guess when they've got food, they'll want to sit down. So, there is an actual reason for having lots of benches in this park. And, speaking of guest safety, we'll add some lights to the pathways that aren't very well lit, as well as to the actual queue lines, except of course for the roller coaster again, because we still need to do the station for all of that. I thought the station for the roller coaster will probably have its own internal lighting, so I'll see how that ends up looking, and then I'll just use, the same kind of lamps for the rest of the queue line. But there we are. We're ready to unpause the game and let the guests enter, and immediately, in just a second, you'll notice half the vendors just left. Look at that. She just jumped out of her stall and walked off. And this is one thing I just don't understand about Planet Coaster. Like, look, this guy's depressed. He ends up leaving. That guy left the Pip Shop water shop. I got it right. Yes. Like, I just don't get it. So I bumped up their page like literally $250 an hour or something ridiculous. And I set them all to be on easy mode, so they're all always happy. And still, all the vendors kept just leaving and wandering out of their booths in a very crowded park. So in the end, and I've got a staff room with enough capacity to support them. I think I bumped it up to 10 in the end, which is the highest capacity you can have for that staff room. And even they were still just always leaving and complaining. So I think in the end, I disabled the staff features in this save. I don't know if that's breaking some rule of the competition. I don't think it does. I surveyed the rules of the competition, and it's mainly just you can't edit the park border. And that's it. So I think it's still in compliance, and you don't have to have the staff features enabled. But my goodness, I just don't get it. When I'm playing a sandbox game, I don't want to worry about micromanagement, because Planet Coaster's micromanagement is not very good. If you want to play a theme park building game and focus on the management side, you got to play Parkitect. It's much better than Planet Coaster for that sort of thing. I prefer Planet Coaster a lot more than Parkitect, don't get me wrong, because I love being creative and building things out of my imagination, except for paths. You basically got to do what the path tool wants you to do for those. But in terms of being a management game, Planet Coaster is not as good as Parkitect. And that's why I hate how they kind of forced the management on us. You can either have no management at all, or management that doesn't seem to ever work unless you baby step your way through it constantly and constantly babysit the staff members, which I don't really like doing. Kind of a weird, somewhat of a rant just then, wasn't it? Let's say I'm sure if I put some time into learning how it actually works, I could probably do it, but I don't know. Management is just something I've never really been too fussed about in this game. Now we're going to build the actual station building itself. So again, very, very, very simple. Just a simple cage structure that has a sloped roof. And that's it. That's going to be it. We've pretty much finished building the station, in fact. Obviously, we'll need to put some fencing. Got to think about safety around the actual station platform. We'll also put a little rack in so that guests have a place to put their bags and stuff when they get on the ride. But other than that, that's the station building. And there you go. I've made these little sort of custom. They're not really properly custom. They're just two kinds of lights clipped together. Well, it's two of the same kind of light clipped together to make a new shape. That's one of my gripes about Planet Coaster. And it was so nearly not a gripe. There are so many kinds of lights in Planet Coaster, but so many of them don't actually emit any light. The most egregious example of this are the sci-fi lights, because they look really cool. Like those strip lights look amazing, but they don't actually emit any ambient light, or at least not a noticeable amount by any degree. Like if you just place the sci-fi lights and then set the lighting of the time of day to nighttime, the park is pitch black. The lights, they're just like a white color, but they don't emit any ambient lighting themselves. So there aren't many lights you can actually use to light stuff up. You've got the gothic kind of lights from the spooky pack. You've got these ones that I've placed in the station. And then there's a few very heavily themed ones like the fairy tale style lights, which are quite hard to incorporate into a lot of parks. And that's it. So if you want just generic theming, or, just a sci-fi or modern theme, you haven't really got any options for lighting. You've got the cubic lights, but that's about it. The other ones you got, but they're attached to a big stick with a base. If you just want just a light piece with nothing else attached to it, this is one of the only options you have. So I thought flipping these pieces upside down at least makes them look a little bit unique and just a kind of a quirky design that we intended. So, that would be something, I don't know, because it can't be a glitch, because surely they would have realized it by now and would have fixed the fact that a lot of the lights in this game don't emit any ambient lighting. So it must just be an intended feature of them. But it is kind of a disappointing. It'd be nice to just get some generic lights, maybe just a completely unthemed LED that you can then just sync into other structures to just emit ambient light around it. That's just by. Maybe if I put any thought into these commentaries, I could come up with a proper solution right now, but I don't, so I can't. But that's the roller coaster station. Moving on, and now you can see I said I didn't want to place any lights along the pathway of the queue because I wanted to see how the internal lights of the station ended up looking, and now we've gone with this inverted Victorian style light on a red pole. We'll just use those for the queue and exit line of the roller coaster. But the final thing we need to do, now we've built the station, is to build the transfer track and the maintenance shed to get cars off and on the main loop of the roller coaster. Now, I've only got one track in the maintenance shed. It's long enough to have both cars in it, but it probably would have been a bit more realistic to have kind of two tracks in the maintenance shed, so both cars could be separated and not on the same track. But again, I wasn't too fussed because, again, a lot of roller coasters, a lot of Eurofighter coasters don't have transfer tracks at all. You know, much less two separate tracks for both individual cars. So I'm not too concerned about realism here, because a lot of Eurofighters, this would be fine, I imagine. Because a lot of Eurofighters don't even have transfer tracks to begin with. Generally, the cars are just loaded onto the track and off the track directly from a truck, no transfer track required. Which does pose a slight problem for this park, because the only access to the park is it's the gate that connects the backstage of the high street to the outside world. That's the only gate to the backstage of this park. So it's going to be very hard for any kind of truck to navigate from that. Well, it's going to be impossible for any truck to navigate from the roads into this part of the park unless you were to literally pull down the walls and fencing of this section of the park. So I did violate the rules of the challenge. I haven't done it now, but I will. And that is I put a gate. I took out some of the fencing and put a gate there so that heavy goods vehicles can access this part of the park. So, I mean, when it comes... I probably should have mentioned this, actually. I assumed that most people watching this video have at least seen the beginning of the previous episode in this mini-series where I laid out the thesis for this park. Basically, this is part of this park is made for a challenge laid down by the Bro Nation Discord server, and that you have to build a very small park in a set map. That's the perimeter of this park. That was part of the map that I downloaded. You've got to build a park inside that map and not change anything about the perimeter or anything. That's the challenge. And you've got to make the park realistic and all that. So that's kind of why I'm saying, oh, this might break the rules of the challenge because I have modified the perimeter. So I have probably now disqualified myself. I'll probably submit 2 versions of this map, one with and one without the changes to the perimeter fence, just so I'm definitely safe. But yes, just as a disclaimer, this might be in violation of the rules. But right now, I'm still fully compliant, I hope, with the challenge. Now I'm just sorting out the painting of the ride, because I don't like the fact that the track is black and red. I wanted a red track, but I couldn't change the track to be all red unless the actual lift hill had red support, which didn't look very good. But then I remembered you can actually just color separate pieces of the track different colors if you want. So I quickly manually it doesn't matter. I mean, you guys could see, right? I just manually changed the color of the lift hill. Now I've moved on to other things. Here I'm just covering up the bollards to the entrance of the Ferris wheel queue, because I wish you could toggle those bollards or at least change the way they look, because they're so big and cumbersome. So I've covered them up with concrete pillars. We'll put some signs up for the individual flat rides as well. But for now, we need to focus on adding some supports for the roller coaster, because although we've got supports enabled, obviously this thing comes in such close proximity to things like paths and indeed the other flat rides that sometimes the automatically generated supports got despawned. So we'll need to rebuild some of them. And for some reason, like, generally the supports that you get in this game are good. They match the kind of supports you get with the roller coasters. But the Eurofighter supports, I mean, I keep calling it the Eurofighter because that's what it is in real life. I think in the game it's called the Typhoon because that's, I guess, what it's referencing, because there's a plane called the Eurofighter Typhoon. And I'm assuming that's why it's called Typhoon in the game. Maybe it's not, and I'm just making this up. I'm sure it's called Typhoon in the game. Regardless, you don't get those supports as part of the scenery. So I had to kind of make supports that look kind of like the same supports as the rest of the ones on this roller coaster. But things like the footers, for example, look totally different on this ride. And, you know, yeah, maybe if I cobbled together some minute pieces, I could have made the footers look a bit closer to reality. I thought this was fine. You know, people aren't going to be looking that closely, I imagine. I don't really know how realistic this support framework is just here, but I feel like it looks like it would be able to support the weight of the track just fine. So that's want to go and building this little steel box just here to maintain that cut, well, to hold up that cut back. Again, with the car paused in such a position that I can make sure it's not going to hit any of the supports if a guest were to stick their hands out when it's at that point in the track. Now I'm going to add a little support for the Heartline roll again. This was actually removed by being too close to another part of the roller coaster, ironically. So I had to quickly make another support for the Heartline roll and indeed the piece of track above it. So again, I made another boxy shape. I like to think this is a fairly realistic looking support. Like, it's a bit flimsy at the moment, but I will add some diagonal supports just to help maintain its structural strength. There we are. I know these aren't the right connection pieces for this type of ride, but again, I think it's fine for what it's for what I need it to do. There we go. So I'm adding some diagonal supports again with the car paused at the right moment to make sure we're not getting too close to any rider. And then we can do the same thing for the other side. And now I'm happy with the appearance of this. I'm adding some flanges just to really sell this as in keeping with the rest of the supports for this ride. Now I think it looks fairly indistinct from the supports that the game generated. And that's pretty much the Eurofighter done. So I'm going to show a quick POV here. I will show a real-time POV at the end of this episode once the rest of the park is done, and there's a few more things to look at as we traverse its layout, but there's a very quick POV, just so you've got an idea of what the layout is like. But there's not really much more that we need to do in this park. There's a few things I could probably beef up that transfer track a little bit, add a few more things around it to make it look a bit more realistic, but for the most part, this park is all done. Like, just some guests walking through this piece of scenery. So I thought, put some barriers down quickly just so they don't walk through it. Because the pathfinding AI in this game doesn't consider scenery and walls as things that guests can't walk through. So you can have things like, roof pieces to cover up paths, I guess, is the reason for that. But they will recognize those red barrier pieces and they won't walk through those. So whenever you're placing scenery that intersects pathways, you've got to put down barriers to stop guests walking through it. Which, as you can see, in the case of my understation supports, didn't quite work. I guess that's probably just because at a point there's nowhere for the AI to go, even though there is. But maybe if they're programmed to all walk, like the guests at least are programmed to walk together in a line, then they will have no choice but to just walk through it. I'm not quite sure why. I ain't no programmer, and I don't really know how this game is programmed. So maybe there is a reason why that it didn't work in that instance. But that's why I was placing barriers underneath the scenery. Now here, I kept on having the vendors quit, and they're all complaining, so eventually I think I just fired all of them, because that's the kind of boss I am. Hired some more, and immediately set them all to easy mode, bumped up their pay. I mentioned this earlier, didn't I? But now I'm actually bumping it up to ludicrous amounts of pay, as well as, all the other members of staff get nice promotions, and having, some of their colleagues fired as well to reduce the fact that they're all a bit underworked, because there's too many of them doing the same job. And then here I am setting all of the staff members to easy mode. However, you will notice later on this didn't work. Vendors still kept on leaving their shops and not manning their stations. I don't know why. So in the end, I think I just disabled all the staff features. But if you wanted to download this park from the Steam Workshop, which will hopefully be linked in the description, or at least, linked in the POV video, which I'm thinking of doing a separate video just to showcase all the POVs and just general walking around the park, because this video is very long. I don't want to artificially lengthen it any further. So I'll probably stick that in another video. So maybe there'll be a workshop link in that one, I don't know. But I'll try and put one in the description of this video as well if I can, because I guess it's not going to be a spoiler at that point, because you'll already seen the construction of it all. Now here I had a bit of a gap in the pathway just here. I thought it looked a bit odd to just have this random little spiked path, so I thought I had a little rocket. Because this ride is called, well, it's gone now, but that ride is called Kerbal X, a reference to my whiskey review series I do on this channel, where I also play some Kerbal Space Program over the top of it. So I thought, let's just build a little rocket that looks a bit like, it doesn't look like Kerbal X, it looks like SLS if anything else, but it's very, very minimalist. It just adds to the little theming of the ride. Like, this is not a very heavily themed park. It's all somewhat low budget. Like, there's clearly some budget gone into it because of the nice theming on High Street, or Main Street, I should say. But it's not like to the same scale as like Disneyland or something like that. So now I'm decided to just quickly beef up the transfer track and have, I put a shipping container here that just contains all the electrics that operate the transfer track. It looks a bit silly having no visible mechanism that moves the sliders. between, moves the sliders of the transfer track. So I'm adding some cables here and some little fiberglass panels just to kind of act as this is here to just represent what would power the transfer track. Again, transfer tracks in this game are purely aesthetic only, they're non-functional, but it's always nice to include it just for the sake of realism. Now I'm adding a staff access gate just so they can access the main, main grounds of the roller coaster. Like if someone did lose their phone or their baby fell out and they need to go retrieve them, hopefully they're okay, and a member of staff could do it. We don't want guests taking life into their own hands and attempting it themselves. We'll have some staff access points so they can get to the grounds of the ride. And I thought I'd add a little walkway just to, break up the monotony of the plain asphalt ground, I suppose. There's a little indicated pathway there for staff members to quickly get to the transfer track shed. Just play down. Now this, I mentioned earlier, I broke the rules of this challenge. This is it. I copied so I'm using the same gate. I thought maybe if I use the exact same gate, that kind of lessens the crime, but it is still breaking the rules nonetheless. So many apologies. I'll probably ask them if they accept this. I mean, I mentioned it in the general Discord chat. Like, this will be okay, and everyone said no. So maybe I will have to undo these changes just for the purposes of submitting the park, and then for my own records, my own personal copy of this park that I'll continue to tweak or whatever over the coming months, I'll keep these changes. So, like I say, hopefully it doesn't count as like too bad of a crime. Like, hopefully it's passable in terms of the general rules, and maybe like, oh, will it slide just this once? But if not, quite easily undone for the purposes of submitting this as an entry to the contest. Now, technically this doesn't break the rules, I don't think, but some of the auto-generated supports do kind of clip through the gates, well, not the gates, the fencing of the park. And I thought if we are trying to keep this in the spirit of the challenge and keep everything nicely contained completely within the confines of that fence, we should probably get rid of those offending supports and create our own that don't breach the perimeter of the park. So that's what I'm going to do here, just place some custom supports, making sure that, the actual confines of this ride's structure definitely remains compliant with the rules of the challenge. So, as mentioned earlier, there aren't really any pieces that look exactly the same as the ones that come by default with this ride, but I would rather just have slightly mismatched supports than go through the very painstaking process of doing fully custom supports. I'm not that bonkers. Custom supports are just the one thing I cannot stand. I find it so boring to do. I've not done fully custom supports on many coasters. The Industrial Revolution coaster in Velocity Lake had mostly custom supports, and the Spinning Mouse coaster in Neptune Park was also fully custom supported, but I think that's it. I don't like doing full custom supports because it's so tedious. I was getting a lot of notifications actually just here of lots of crime happening in the park, so I quickly added loads and loads of CCTV cameras everywhere, and also cameras to the perimeter just for the sake of realism, just because I didn't want to have to deal with too many thefts or anything like that. So that's what I'm quickly doing here. But these CCTV cameras here are the final thing that needs doing. So I'm going to now cut away to live commentary so we can go through and have a little walk around the park together. Okay, so we're in the live commentary portion of this video. Just going to do like a quick sort of miniature tour of this Micromania. Oh, I kind of changed the roof of the entrance building. I hope that's okay, guys. Again, pretty easy to quickly revert if it does in fact violate the rules of the competition, but regardless, here we go. So we enter Main Street. Oh, there goes the roller coaster up the lift hill. I would use Tegid Cam right now, but you can move a little bit faster. Like Tegid Cam, you either walk really slowly or really fast, but by using a controller in normal camera mode, kind of get a slightly better pace for movement. But here we are. There's the the two food stands with the restaurant attached to it. Oh, excuse me, thank you. There's Kerbal X returning from its launch, or in fact going to its launch. It's doing something. The SLS there perpetually in motion. And there go the chair planes. We'll come back to that once it's further down its cycle. There's obviously the kick flip ride, not doing much of anything right now. And of course the loop-de-loop as well. Oh, speaking of loop-de-loops. And there's the little... Oh, we should probably quickly stick a sign on there, actually. Let's just quickly... nothing to see here, people. Nothing to see here. Let's just quickly add a signpost to the toilet, just so people know that it is, in fact, a toilet. That's good. Oh, that's hot. There we go. Epic. We will now resume the tour. Nothing to see here, nothing to see here. There goes the... I mean, I guess you guys want to go on the roller coaster ride, so let's just go on that. So that's what I mean about wanting to have a nice sort of focal point as you enter the park, really, as you like step in and you're just confronted by this magnificent Ferris wheel. And there goes the roller coaster there. So the lift hill is quite fast. I think I would have probably preferred to have it a little bit slower, but to get higher excitement ratings, you've got to have a faster chain list. We can just fly over everyone in drone mode. Excuse me, everyone. Oh, there's a car leaving. Quick! We missed it. Just wait till the next one. The gates are closed. We're actually sitting quite low to the track now I think about it. Oh, I'm not going to talk now for the POV. I will leave you guys to enjoy. So, enjoy. Arriving back at the station. Did you guys miss me? Probably not, but we'll move on. So we'll get up, we'll pick up our bag, and then jump across. Down here. As you can see, the exit queue is a ramp. I like to have disabled access on all my rides, so the exit queue is the disabled access as well. And that's pretty much the park. I mean, this is not a very long tour, obviously, because you know it's very small. It's a very small park. I mean, this is it. There you go. I hope you enjoyed this little sort of miniature divergence from Velocity Lake. I was starting to hit a wall, a creative wall, I should say, with Velocity Lake. So it's nice. It's nice to take a break, work on another project, get the creative juices flowing, and come back to Velocity Lake with lots of inspiration to ultimately complete it, I guess. Because for me, it's nearly done. So, like I say, there's the offending gate. If that's a violation of the rules, sorry, guys, I'll delete it. But it's saying in terms of my copy of the park. But that's it there. Micromania. Working title. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Like I say, I hope you enjoyed this series. I'm going to leave it there. I'll put some links on screen. On the left-hand side, I'll put a link to, I don't know, something, a playlist of some kind. On the right-hand side is a video tailor-selected for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithms. There's also a link to subscribe and check out Patreon as well if you'd like to. And there are things in the description as well. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, my dudes.